You know that moment when your phone dies and suddenly you realize you're completely cut off from the world? Yeah, that's basically how it started. I was out hiking by myself, just trying to clear my head after a brutal week at work, when I got that sinking feeling. No signal, no GPS, and, well, no idea where I was. But that wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was that I wasn't alone, even though I thought I was. See, I had met this guy, Jamie, a few weeks before. We'd met online, like you do, and hit it off pretty fast. He was this laid-back artist type with a crooked smile and this messy mop of hair that somehow looked good, even after a day in the sun. We'd finally decided to meet up in person, and when he invited me to go hiking with him in the woods near my place, I was down. I mean, how weird could it be? I'd grown up near these trails, so I figured I could handle it. Turns out, not so much. We'd taken off early that morning, the kind of crisp, clear day that makes you feel like anything's possible. Jamie was easy to talk to. He had this way of making the quiet spaces between conversations feel comfortable, not awkward. We joked about the usual stuff. Music, bad dates, the fact that neither of us really knew what we were doing with our lives. There was this spark, subtle but undeniable, and I thought maybe this trip was the start of something. Somewhere around the third hour, things got messy. We took a wrong turn. Nothing huge, but enough that the trail markers stopped making sense. Jamie was joking around, trying to keep the mood light, but I could tell he was worried too. We both pulled out our phones, only to find that neither of us had a signal. That's when the panic started to bubble up, because, well, lost in the woods isn't exactly how you want your day to go. We argued a little about the best way back, each stubbornly convinced that our idea was right. I wanted to retrace our steps. Jamie thought we should push forward to find the main road. And then suddenly, Jamie was gone. I turned for 1 second to grab my pack, and when I looked back, he wasn't there anymore. Just empty trees and the echo of his last laugh. I called his name until my voice was hoarse and my chest was burning. The sun was starting to dip low, and the woods felt like they were closing in on me. That's when I heard it. A faint, shaky shout coming from deeper in the forest. I ran toward it, heart pounding, thinking maybe it was a bear or some other nightmare waiting to happen. But no, it was Jamie. He was sitting on the ground, looking lost, exhausted, maybe even a little scared. When I reached him, something shifted between us. It wasn't just relief that we'd found each other. It was like the whole day had peeled back layers we hadn't expected to share. That's when I realized this wasn't just a hike gone wrong. This was the start of something way bigger and way more complicated than either of us had planned. But what I didn't know then was how much that night, trapped in the woods, would change everything. Jamie's eyes were wide, his breath coming in uneven little gasps like he'd been running for miles, which honestly wouldn't have surprised me. When I reached out, I half expected him to pull back, but instead he just slumped a bit, letting me help him up. His shirt was dirt smudged, and there was a scrape on his forearm that looked fresh. "Damn, you scared the hell out of me," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, even though inside, my chest felt like it was squeezed by some invisible hand. The woods had a way of making everything feel more intense, more urgent. Jamie gave me a shaky grin. "Sorry, I thought I could find the main path on my own, but I guess I was wrong." "Yeah, me too," I admitted. "But hey, at least we're together now." We started walking back the way I thought was right, the sun dipping lower and the shadows stretching long and dark. I kept glancing over at Jamie, who was surprisingly quiet. Usually he was the one cracking jokes or pointing out weird plants or birds, but now he just seemed distant, like he was somewhere inside his own head. "You okay?" I finally asked. He shrugged. "Yeah, just thinking." I gave him the side eye. "Thinking about what?" "How we almost died in the woods." He laughed softly, a little hollow. "Maybe." We kept moving, but the woods felt different now, less like an adventure and more like a trap. Every crack of a twig or rustle of leaves made me jump. I caught myself imagining all the worst scenarios. We'd run out of water, get hypothermia, maybe a rescue team would never find us. But then I'd look over and see Jamie, just putting one foot in front of the other, and it grounded me. After what felt like hours, we finally made it back to a recognizable trailhead. The parking lot was empty except for my car, which was a relief and a disappointment all at once. Relief because we were safe, disappointment because it meant no one else could have helped us if things got worse. Jamie flopped down on the hood of my car, exhaustion hitting him all at once. I opened the trunk, grabbed my water bottle, and handed it to him. He took a long drink, eyes closed. "Thanks for finding me," he said quietly. I sat next to him, the cool metal of the car dull against my skin. "Yeah, well, you owe me a serious explanation next time you decide to disappear in the woods." He smiled, but it was soft, almost vulnerable. "Fair." We sat there for a bit, just breathing, the silence between us finally feeling comfortable instead of awkward. I looked over at him and realized I was seeing more than just the guy I'd been casually seeing for a few weeks. I was seeing someone who could be my partner in all the messed up, unpredictable parts of life. "Tell me something," I said, breaking the quiet. "Why did you really want to take this hike? I mean, it's not exactly your scene." Jamie looked at me, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. "I guess I wanted to prove something to myself, that I could do something normal, something easy. But I was wrong about that, wasn't I?" "No," I said, shaking my head. "I think you just need to find your way back." He laughed softly. "And you had to find me." That line hung between us, heavier than I expected. I wanted to say something, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I just sat there, feeling the sun finally set and the stars start to peek out. We didn't rush to leave. Somehow, being lost in the woods and finding each other again felt like the most honest thing that had happened in a while. When we finally got back to my place, we were both quiet, but it wasn't awkward. Jamie sat on the couch, his leg bouncing nervously, and I could tell he was working up the courage to say something. "So," he started, "do you think this means we should maybe, I don't know, see where this goes? Because I'm pretty sure I got lost today in more ways than one." I smiled, heart pounding a little harder than it should have. "Yeah, I think I'm down for that." And just like that, what started as a day where everything went wrong turned into something I never saw coming, a beginning. After that night, things between Jamie and me shifted in a way I hadn't expected. It wasn't like some insta-love cliche where you just know right away. No, it was slow, like a crack in concrete finally letting a little green sprout through. We started texting more, scheduling little meetups that felt less like dates and more like two people figuring out if they actually liked each other outside of getting lost in the woods. One afternoon, about a week later, Jamie invited me back to his place. He lived in this tiny studio downtown filled with canvases and paint tubes all over the place. It was messy, but in a creative, lived-in way. Not like my place, which was functional but boring. He had this art piece he was working on, a vibrant abstract that looked chaotic but somehow had this calming energy. I mentioned it felt like controlled chaos, and he laughed, saying that was a perfect way to describe his head most days. We ended up sitting on his couch, sharing a bottle of cheap wine, just talking about everything and nothing. I told him about the job I hated but stuck with because, well, rent doesn't pay itself. He told me about his dreams of making it as an artist, even if it seemed like a long shot. And then, out of nowhere, he said, "You know, I'm glad I got lost that day." I looked at him, surprised. "Really? You're glad you got lost?" He nodded. "Yeah, because otherwise, I might never have realized I wanted more than just casual stuff with you." That hit me harder than I expected. I'd been so scared of getting too close, too fast. But hearing him say that made me want to take that leap. We leaned into each other then, the kind of moment that feels suspended in time. Our lips met, tentative at first, and then with more certainty. It was messy and imperfect, but it felt right. I remember thinking, God, if getting lost means finding this, maybe getting lost isn't so bad after all. After that night, things started to feel more real between us. We weren't just two guys hanging out. We were a couple, navigating all the awkwardness and excitement that comes with it. We spent weekends exploring new trails, this time with proper maps and charged phones, trying to turn our bad experience into a shared adventure. But of course, it wasn't all perfect. One night, a few weeks in, we got into a fight. It was stupid, about something small, him being late to dinner, but it quickly spiraled into deeper stuff. We both had baggage, fears of getting hurt, and the scars of past relationships that still lingered. I remember standing in his kitchen, the tension so thick I could cut it with a knife, wondering if this was going to be the end before it even really began. But then Jamie sighed, running a hand through his hair, and said, "Look, I'm scared too. I don't want to mess this up." I looked at him and realized I felt the same. So instead of walking away, we talked it out, really talked, in that honest, vulnerable way that's scary but necessary. That night taught me that love isn't just about the easy moments. It's about sticking around when things get messy. Fast forward a couple of months, and now whenever I'm on a trail, I get this little smile creeping onto my face because I know that getting lost in those woods wasn't a mistake. It was the start of something I didn't even know I was ready for. Jamie and I have our ups and downs like anyone else, but there's this unspoken understanding between us, a knowing that sometimes you have to lose your way to find where you truly belong. And honestly, I wouldn't change a thing. One rainy evening, a few months into us officially being a thing, Jamie and I found ourselves sitting in his cramped little kitchen, the kind of kitchen that was so small you could almost touch both ends with your outstretched arms. There was a half-eaten takeout box between us, the scent of Thai food still lingering in the air, and outside the rain tapped against the window in a steady, soothing rhythm. Jamie had this habit of getting lost in thought, staring out the window like he was trying to see something beyond the rain-soaked city streets. I was watching him, feeling that familiar mix of affection and curiosity. "What's on your mind?" I finally asked, leaning back against the counter. He didn't turn to look at me right away, which made me a little nervous. When he finally did, his eyes were softer, almost hesitant. "I was just thinking about that day in the woods. You know, how everything felt like it was falling apart, but then finding you made it all." "Okay." I smiled and reached over to squeeze his hand. "Yeah, me too. It's weird how the worst days can end up meaning the most, huh?" Jamie nodded, biting his lip. "I guess I've been scared to admit it before, but I think that day made me realize I want something real, not just casual dates or flings. I want us." Hearing him say that out loud made my heart skip. "I want that too," I said quietly. More than I thought I could. There was this pause, like the whole world had slowed down just for that moment. Then Jamie leaned in and kissed me, slow and sure, like he was making a promise without words. It wasn't perfect, it never was, but it was real, and that was enough. A few days later, we decided to tackle a longer hike together. I wanted to prove to Jamie, and maybe to myself, that we could handle the trails without getting lost this time. We packed up early, loaded our backpacks with water, snacks, and a map that we both promised to actually follow. The woods were alive with the sounds of spring, birds chirping, leaves rustling, and somewhere in the distance, the faint rush of a stream. Jamie was his usual playful self, pointing out odd-shaped trees and making up ridiculous names for them. I laughed more than I had in weeks. But as we climbed higher, the trail got steeper and narrower, and I noticed Jamie slowing down. He was breathing harder, his face flushed. "You okay?" I asked, concerned. "Yeah," he said, but I wasn't convinced. He glanced at me, then away again. This hill is tougher than I thought." I reached out and gave his shoulder a gentle squeeze. "Hey, we're in this together. No one's leaving anyone behind." He smiled, the kind of smile that's both grateful and a little embarrassed. "Thanks. I hate asking for help, but I guess I'm lucky you don't mind." We kept going, supporting each other up the hill, and when we finally reached the summit, the view was worth every huff and puff. The city sprawled below us, tiny and distant, while the sky stretched wide and open. Jamie pulled me close, and we stood there in silence, the kind that feels comfortable and full at the same time. "You ever think about what comes next?" he asked. I shrugged. "Honestly, I try not to think too far ahead, but right now, I just want to keep doing this. The hikes, the talks, the messiness of us." He laughed softly. "Yeah, the messiness, because no relationship is perfect. But this one feels worth it." Jamie's eyes were serious, and then he surprised me by reaching into his backpack and pulling out a small, hand-carved wooden box. "I made this," he said, handing it to me. I opened it carefully. Inside was a tiny compass, old-fashioned. with a little needle that spun until it settled pointing north. "For when we get lost," he said with a smirk. I looked up at him, my chest tightening. "Jamie, this is perfect." He shrugged, cheeks flushed. "I guess I'm a hopeless romantic. Or maybe just someone who knows that sometimes getting lost means finding exactly what you need." We sat down on a nearby rock, the compass resting in my palm. The woods felt different now, not scary or overwhelming, but like a place where we could find ourselves and each other, even when the path wasn't clear. That hike wasn't just about conquering a trail. It was about learning to trust, to lean on someone, and to believe that love, like a compass, can guide you home, even when you feel completely lost. A few days after that hike, Jamie and I found ourselves curled up on his threadbare couch, the one place that somehow felt like the safest spot in the world. The rain was pouring outside again, the kind of relentless drizzle that turns city streets into shiny mirrors and forces people to slow down. We were watching an old movie neither of us really cared about, mostly because the flickering light was a perfect excuse to stay close without having to say much. Jamie's head was resting on my shoulder, his eyelashes fluttering as he fought off sleep. I could feel the steady rise and fall of his breath, and I realized how much I'd come to depend on him. It scared me a little, that kind of vulnerability, but it also felt like the best kind of risk. "Hey," he mumbled, eyes still closed. "Yeah?" I was thinking about that day in the woods again. I smiled, brushing a stray hair back from his forehead. "You and that day." He chuckled softly, then his voice got serious. "It's just, I've been carrying a lot of stuff with me, you know? Stuff I didn't even realize I had until I was sitting there, lost and scared. And finding you, it was like a lifeline." I tightened my arm around him. "I get that. I think I've been carrying my own weight around too long. Maybe that's why I didn't want to get close at first." He lifted his head, eyes meeting mine. "But now, I said, I don't want to carry it alone anymore." There was this quiet honesty between us that felt like a balm. No games, no pretenses, just two guys trying to figure out how to be there for each other. The next morning, I woke up to sunlight streaming through the thin curtains and the sound of Jamie humming in the kitchen. When I walked in, he was making coffee, the steam curling up in lazy spirals. "Morning," he said, flashing me that crooked smile that never failed to make my heart skip. "Morning," I replied, wrapping my arms around him from behind. There was a pause before he said, "You hungry? I can whip up some eggs." "Always," I said, laughing. We sat at his tiny kitchen table, eating breakfast and talking about everything from ridiculous TV shows to our childhood memories. Jamie told me about his first art show and how nervous he'd been, how he'd almost bailed at the last minute. I shared stories about my family, the awkward holiday dinners, the weird traditions we'd somehow stuck to. It felt like we were building something, a foundation made of shared stories and quiet moments that didn't need to be flashy to be meaningful. But life, as it always does, threw a curveball. A week later, Jamie got a call that could change everything. An opportunity to showcase his work in a gallery downtown, a chance he'd been chasing for years. It was everything he'd wanted, but it also meant long hours, pressure, and a chance that things might get messy between us. That night, we sat on his balcony, the city lights blinking below like a galaxy of stars. Jamie was unusually quiet, staring off into the distance. "Talk to me," I said gently. He sighed. "I don't want this to mess us up. I'm afraid I'm going to get so caught up in it that I'll lose sight of us." I took his hand. "Jamie, if there's one thing I've learned, it's that relationships aren't about being perfect. They're about showing up, even when things get tough." He squeezed my hand back, eyes glistening. "I want to show up for you. I really do. I'm here," I promised. No matter what. In the weeks that followed, Jamie was a whirlwind. Late nights, new faces, the thrill and exhaustion of chasing a dream. I tried to be patient, understanding, but there were moments when I felt like I was fading into the background, an afterthought in a world that suddenly seemed too big. One night, After a particularly long day, Jamie came home and flopped onto the couch, completely drained. I stayed silent for a while, watching him, before finally saying, "Hey, do you want to talk about it?" He blinked at me, a flicker of vulnerability breaking through the exhaustion. "I'm scared. What if this changes me? What if I'm not the guy you fell for?" I shook my head, moving closer. "Jamie, people change. That's life. But if you ever stop being you, or if you try to be someone else to impress me, you'll lose me. I want the real you. Messy, scared, ambitious, flawed. All of it." He let out a shaky laugh. "You're a lot to live up to." I smiled. "Maybe, but I'm worth it." We sat there for a long time, no words needed, just holding on to that fragile, beautiful thing we'd found in each other. Looking back now, I realized that day in the woods was more than just a bad hike. It was the moment that set everything in motion. The moment we found each other when we were both a little lost, a little scared, and maybe exactly what the other needed. And honestly, I'm grateful every single day for getting lost, because it led me to the best thing I never knew I was looking for. The gallery opening came faster than I expected. Jamie had been working tirelessly for weeks, mixing his usual chaotic bursts of creativity with a new, intense focus that both impressed and scared me. The last few days before the show, he was a whirlwind, running around, talking to people I'd never heard of, obsessing over lighting and placement. I tried to keep up, but there were moments when it felt like he was slipping away, like the man I'd gotten to know was getting swallowed up by this dream he'd chased for so long. The night of the opening, I showed up early, dressed in something that wasn't hiking boots, which was a small victory in itself. The gallery was buzzing with people, friends, strangers, critics, and a few familiar faces from Jamie's art world. The place smelled like wine and old paint, the walls covered in his work ranging from bold splashes of color to more intimate, raw pieces that felt like windows into his soul. Jamie was glowing, nervous energy sparkling in his eyes as he moved through the crowd. When he saw me, that crooked smile stretched wide and he rushed over, grabbing my hand like he needed something solid in the chaos. "I'm glad you're here," he said, voice low, almost breathless. I grinned. Wouldn't miss it. As the night went on, Jamie was pulled in a dozen directions, shaking hands, answering questions, posing for pictures. I watched him, proud but also feeling this strange distance, like I was on the outside looking in. Between mingling guests and the buzz of conversation, I caught myself wondering if I was enough, that maybe the guy who got lost in the woods didn't really belong in this shiny new chapter of his life. Later, when the crowd thinned and the gallery quieted down, Jamie and I found a corner away from the noise. He was exhausted, but his eyes still burned with that fierce spark I loved. "You did amazing," I said, pulling him close. He shook his head, laughing softly. "I don't know if I did. There's so much more I want to do to prove." I cupped his face, forcing him to look at me. "You don't have to prove anything to me. I'm here because of you, not the artist everyone's talking about tonight." He swallowed hard, and for a moment, that vulnerability I'd been afraid would disappear came rushing back. "I'm scared," he admitted. "Scared that once this is over, I'll lose you, that I'm not enough." I kissed his forehead, trying to transfer some of my certainty to him. "Jamie, you're more than enough. And I'm not going anywhere." The relief in his eyes made me realize how fragile this whole thing was, how much it took to trust someone when you'd been hurt or lost before. In the weeks after the opening, things settled into a new rhythm. Jamie's career was blossoming, which was amazing to watch, but it also meant less time and more stress. I tried to be patient, to support him without smothering or stepping back too far. It was a balancing act neither of us had mastered. One night, after a particularly long day for both of us, I found Jamie sitting on the floor of his studio, surrounded by canvases and paint-stained rags, his face buried in his hands. "Hey," I said softly, sitting beside him. He looked up, eyes red and tired. "I don't know if I can do this." "Do what?" I asked. "Keep up. Keep creating. Keep being everything everyone expects." I reached out, tracing the line of his jaw. "You don't have to be anyone but yourself. We'll figure this out together." He smiled faintly, but I could tell the weight was still there. Days later, we went for a walk in the park, trying to escape the pressure of city life. The air was crisp, leaves crunching beneath our boots, and for a little while, it felt like just two guys enjoying a simple moment. Jamie stopped suddenly, pulling me close. "Thanks for sticking with me, even when I'm a mess." I laughed. "You're not a mess. You're just human." He looked up at me, eyes shining. "I'm lucky to have you. Right back at you." That night, as we lay tangled in his sheets, I realized that love wasn't about perfection or grand gestures. It was about the quiet moments, the messy days, the fears shared and faced together. Jamie and I had gotten lost in the woods that day, but we'd also found each other, and that was the best kind of discovery. No matter what came next, I knew we'd face it side by side, because sometimes getting lost isn't the end of the story. It's just the beginning. Months passed, and with each one, Jamie and I grew more comfortable in the rhythm of us. It wasn't always smooth. There were still late nights when exhaustion took over, moments when the weight of his career and my own insecurities pressed in. But we'd learned how to lean on each other without losing ourselves. The messy, awkward, imperfect kind of love that felt real. One chilly autumn evening, Jamie invited me out for a walk near the same woods where it all began. The trees were turning golden red, leaves crunching underfoot, the air crisp but not yet cold. We didn't say much at first, just walked side by side, like we had before. But this time, the silence felt warm, like we were sharing something deeper than words. Stopping near a familiar bend in the trail, Jamie pulled something from his jacket pocket, a small, folded piece of paper. My heart skipped before I even saw what it was. Opening it, I found a simple handwritten note. "I got lost once, but I found my way back because of you. Let's keep finding our way together." Looking up, Jamie met my eyes, a shy smile tugging at his lips. "I don't have a fancy ring or a big speech, but I wanted you to know you're the best thing I didn't see coming." I reached out, taking his hand in mine, fingers curling together naturally. "I'm not going anywhere. Lost or found, messy or perfect, that's us." He squeezed my hand, eyes shining in the fading light. "Yeah, that's us." We stood there for a while, just holding on to that moment, the woods around us whispering stories of getting lost and found. I realized that love wasn't some grand gesture or flawless path. It was this, two people choosing each other, again and again, even when the way wasn't clear. Driving home that night, I felt something settle inside me, a quiet certainty that no matter what twists and turns lay ahead, Jamie and I would face them together. Because sometimes the best journeys start when you lose your way, and the most unexpected love grows out of the moments you thought you'd never find your way back from. And honestly, I wouldn't trade that day in the woods for anything.